Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Lighthouse Within. This is your host, Ambar Paloma, but you can also call me Amber. This podcast is all about building your inner strength, gaining the ability to bounce back stronger from life's setbacks, and becoming a resilient person. Because this is the first episode of the podcast, I really wanted to take some time to tell you a little bit more about my story and why I've decided to start this podcast. I really think the story of this podcast gets to start around the time that I was 11 years old. And that's because I actually spent a lot of years struggling with depression. And if I could trace it back to the beginning, it was around the time that I was 11. I kind of wrote a lot of it off as teenage angst, and I guess I thought what I was going through was normal because I was still a high achiever. I was still one of the best students in my school. I was still winning awards across the nation. I was editor-in-chief of my high school newspaper. I was starting volunteer projects across the city. I was starting organizations at school, winning the Principal's Pride Award, getting in the Hall of Fame, and I had tons of friends. And by all accounts, I don't think I raised any red flags, except I spent a lot of time in my childhood just going home and crying, isolating, and randomly just exiting my friend groups. And I think, again, I just thought it was teenage angst and I didn't really think too much about it until I was around 18 or 19 years old. Yeah, I was around 19 years old. And it felt like everything just came collapsing down on me. At that point, the depression had gotten so crippling and so severe that I was spending multiple weeks in isolation alone in my bedroom with the blinds pulled shut, watching reruns of the 70s show for company while stacks of takeout just were littered across my bedroom floor. I think at that time, I was also really struggling with social anxiety. And I had begun to feel so worthless as a human being that I was afraid to leave my house. I was afraid to go to the grocery store because I thought the woman at the cash register would realize how worthless I was and how unworthy of human life I was. And she would question why I was alive. And I know that that sounds really intense, but at the time, that was very real for me. Because the reality was I was also questioning why I was alive. And I really struggled with wanting to be alive. And it wasn't that I wanted to take my own life, but I had this sense that, like, if my life was taken from me, I wouldn't care. And I had this feeling like nobody else would care either. I remember at the time I confided in a friend of mine what I was feeling, or at least I confided in her some of what I was feeling. And she told me that I should go to the Counseling and Wellness Center, which I didn't know was a thing at the time. So shout out to that friend. And I still remember the therapist's office. I still remember what it looked like. I still remember her blonde hair and the way it framed her face. I still remember her brown eyes and the way she looked at me and said, "I know it doesn't feel like it, but it's going to be okay. And I'm really proud of you for coming in today." And it really does seem like that story belongs to a whole different person, because I can't imagine today not wanting to live. If someone met me today, they would probably describe me as being really bubbly and joyful. And I definitely give gratitude for my life every single day. So it's really bizarre for me to think of that time in my life. And when I was reflecting on this podcast, I really thought that's where this story starts. Because in some weird turn of events, I think I was supposed to go through that. I think I was supposed to feel like I was falling into that bottomless well. I was supposed to go get help. I was supposed to learn what it's like to crawl out of that well. And I was supposed to share it with somebody else. So just in case they're also going through a hard time, they know that it is possible to get out on the other side and live an amazing life. Over the years, a lot of people called me to this work, including a lot of my therapists. I've had at least 3 therapists tell me, "Have you ever considered becoming a therapist?" And one of them also told me I should write a book, and that is definitely on my bucket list. What I really want to share with you all throughout this podcast is how to become a resilient person. Because if I could think of one skill set that has helped me go through that and everything else that has come afterwards, It's resiliency. So what is resilience? It is the capacity to withstand or recover quickly from life's difficulties. It's toughness. It's your source of inner strength. But I also love this other definition, which says it's the ability of a substance or object to spring back into shape. And I absolutely just love that visual of something springing back into shape, because I imagine the springs inside of a really luxury, top of the line, amazing mattress. And I imagine this grimy bulldozer just coming and flattening that mattress all the way down to the ground so that it's just this thin sheet splattered against the asphalt. And I imagine that the moment that bulldozer starts lifting off the mattress, the springs just go right back into shape. And that's what I want for you. In those moments where you feel like you are falling into the bottomless well, in those moments where you feel like you're about to fall apart, in those moments where you feel like you're about to break, in those moments where you feel like life has just pushed you down, I want you to be able to stand back up and say, you must not know who I am, because I spring back into shape. I bend, but I do not break. I get back up. I bounce back better. I have a lighthouse within. So I started looking into what makes a person resilient, right? What are the characteristics that make a person resilient? And I really think this is the foundation of this podcast. So if you were to ask me, what are we going to talk about throughout this podcast? We're going to talk about a lot of things, but it's going to all come back to these skill sets. The first thing is being optimistic and positive. And no, you do not have to be born this way. I actually used to be a really pessimistic person. This is something you can learn to cultivate. It's also being adaptable. That means you can be put into any situation and figure out how to get yourself out. It's also having a strong social network. And no, you do not need to be born into the right family. No, you do not need to be an extrovert. And no, you do not currently need to have amazing friends. These are things you can work on. It's also having confidence. And that doesn't just mean looking into the mirror and liking what's in the reflection. It also means being confident in your abilities, knowing that you have the tools, abilities, and knowledge to get through anything that comes your way and to accomplish the things you want to accomplish. It's also having emotional awareness and emotional intelligence, not just suppressing your emotions and becoming a negative, bitter shell of yourself, but knowing how to move through your emotions, how to feel them in a way that is conductive and helps you come out through that situation with your joy and your happiness intact. It's also having a strong sense of self, knowing what you want, what you need, and what you value, so that no matter what's going on around you, you can plug into who you really are, your authentic voice, and make the right choices for yourself. It's also having self-control and being solution-oriented and resourceful. And finally, it's being patient and having the right coping skills. So where do we start this journey? How does one become a resilient person? How does one become someone who doesn't break, but bends and bounces back better? And recently, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and she was just venting to me about a situation that she was going through. And she's just she's getting frustrated, she's getting annoyed, and she says this phrase that I'm sure we have all said at some point in our lives. And she goes, "She should know better, and I should know better." And I really felt like, I like that. That's where this podcast starts. And I love that she said that, because it really made me think. I spent a lot of time reflecting. It really made me think, what exactly does it mean to know better? Especially in the year 2024. If you live in a developed area, we have so much access to information. It's almost like the age of information overload. If you live in a developed area, you have access to almost all the information in the world sitting in your pocket. So in the age where we can know anything, what does it mean to know better? So I really decided to break this down. And I was like, what does it mean to know? So one definition says, Knowing is to be aware of through observation, inquiry, or information. It's to be familiar. And I love those phrases, to be aware of, to be familiar, because when I looked at that, I was like, that sounds like really non-committal. It sounds like, hey, Amber, have you met my friend Jeff? And you're like, he looks kind of familiar. Did I meet you at Stacy's party last week? I don't know anyone named Stacy or Jeff. I don't know why I use those names. But yeah, it just sounds like really non-committal. And then what does it mean to be better, right? To know better. Better. Better is just a comparative word. Better just means more than last time. So the crazy thing is, if today I give you 2% and yesterday I gave you 1%, this is actually me giving you better. The problem is you were expecting like at least 80% from me. And in a best case scenario, you would like my full 100, but I'm not there. And so the sad reality is that might have been her better. That might have been her knowing better. It's just she doesn't know everything you want her to know, right? And what I realized in this reflection is that when we're asking people to know better and when we're asking ourselves to know better, what we're asking is not for you to have more knowledge. It's not for you to have more information, because in 2024, it's not that hard to be aware. What we're asking for is for you to apply this knowledge. It's for you to do something with that knowledge. Now, what does it mean to do? Just so we're all on the same page here, you know what I'm saying? To do means to perform, to achieve, to apply, to complete. It's to take that knowledge, it's to take that awareness, it's to take that familiarity and perform it and achieve it and complete it and apply it. So what we're really wanting is for you to do something with that knowledge, keeping in mind that better is still a comparative term, okay? So maybe let's just have a little grace for each other and for ourselves, because better at the end of the day just means more than last time. So I was having this reflection and a friend of mine was talking to me about a breakup that they're going through. But this person has a distinct pleasure that they get to continuously run into the person who broke up with them, which is just sounds fantastic, right? And so they're just like venting about how much this is affecting them. And then they're sitting there and they're telling me, they're like, I know I should block them. I know I should stop checking their social media profile. I know I should stop reaching out to them. I know that outside of the times when we bump into each other, I should stop trying to hang out with them, right? But I can't do it. He said, I know, but I can't do it. And there it is again. In 2024, we have so much access to knowledge. But why is it that we can't do things? So that really got me thinking, how do we go from simply knowing to doing? Because I think a lot of the time, a lot of us know what we should be doing. We know what we could be doing, but we don't do it. So how do we go from knowledge phase to application phase? And the first question I have for you is, are you ready? Are you ready to change? Because the reality is change is hard. It's not going to be easy, right? But you need to decide that you're ready to do it. Earlier this year, I was reading this book called The 12-Week Year, and it's a fantastic book, by the way. 10 out of 10, do recommend. If you're someone who wants to become more productive or work on your goals, it's a great book to read, so I definitely recommend it. But I love this one thing that he said about accountability, and it's that no one can hold you accountable. And he uses the timeless example of someone who decides that they're going to start a fitness journey, right? And if you've ever started a fitness journey, you've probably tried to get yourself a gym buddy. Now, what's the problem with the gym buddy? If you aren't actually committed to going to the gym, if you aren't actually committed to the fitness journey, you're going to find this gym buddy. You guys are going to set a schedule together. You're going to say, hold me accountable, gym buddy. And what's going to happen that day when you get up and you decide you didn't actually want to go to the gym? You're going to start shooting this person excuses. You're going to send them enough excuses that the gym buddy's going to stop reaching out to you, right? He's going to stop reaching out to you. And now things are a little tense in your friendship because you've kind of been ghosting them. You haven't been holding up your end of the bargain, right? They kept trying to hold you accountable, but the reality is they can't hold you accountable to something you aren't committed to doing within yourself, right? Some part of you has to decide that you're ready and that you're going to do the work. And in the book, he says, the real accountability we face as adults isn't disappointing our gym buddy. It isn't disappointing our accountability partner. It's the consequence of our inaction. The accountability is the price we pay for not changing the thing we're complaining about. So the accountability of not ending your people-pleasing patterns is you continue to build friendships with people who make you feel like you're getting taken advantage of. The accountability of not quitting that job that you can't stop complaining about is that you become more and more and more and more and more bitter day by day. The accountability of not ending that toxic relationship is that you end up being a shell of yourself that you don't even recognize. The accountability of not facing your fears is that you continue to put your dreams on the back burner until so many years pass by and you realize, I never did any of the things I wanted to do. The accountability is the price you pay, because the reality is the gym buddy 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now will probably forget that you ever decided to be accountability buddies. He'll forget that you ever decided to try to be gym buddies. He'll forget. You'll reconcile, it'll all be good, but you will still be left with the consequence. You will still be paying the price of not making the change. That's the accountability that we face as adults. And I say as adults because, when you're a kid, like your mom could probably hold you to it. But as adults, no one can really hold us to it if we don't want to hold ourselves to it. The great thing about change, and I love that the book says this, is if you get it right even 75 to 80% of the time, and you account for 20 to 25% error, you will still make progress. So it does not have to be perfect, but whether it's today, it's tomorrow, it's a week from now, or a year from now, you eventually need to decide that you're ready to make the change. The second thing I recommend that you do if you're ready to make a change is to find a guide. And the reason is because, let's be real, changing is hard. If it was easy, we would all do it. And a lot of us will not change, right? Everyone grows older, but not everybody grows up. That is just a reality that we live with. So if you're ready to make a change, I really recommend that you find a guide. And depending on where you're at and what you want to do, that guide is going to look different. So my recommendation to you is to pick one thing that you want to work on. It could be small, it could be big. Pick one thing you want to work on and find somebody to help you on the journey. The reason is because the setbacks are inevitable. The obstacles are going to be inevitable, but having someone tell you that this is normal, that it's still progress, is also really helpful. And having someone who can show you the best way to move forward is a fantastic asset. Plus, let's not forget that being resilient also means being resourceful. And I think finding a guide is part of that resourcefulness. So depending again on your budget, the kind of things that you want to do, or the kind of things that you want to change, your guide could look like a therapist, it could look like a coach, it could look like a mentor, a group, an app, a workbook, a workshop, a course, but find yourself a guide that will help you build the things that you want to build. The third thing that I recommend for you is to start spending more time in reflection. And the reason why I recommend this is because at the beginning of my journey, especially when I was dealing with depression and anxiety, and of course, also I was a lot younger, but I was really disconnected from my inner voice. And this disconnection from my inner voice caused me to never have a firm understanding of what I wanted, what I needed, and even what my values were. There were a lot of times where I would be in situations where I would say, I don't know if this criticism I'm hearing in my head is coming from me. Is it coming from something my dad said? Is it coming from something my grandmother said? Was it something my sister said sometime? Did it come from a friend? Like, I literally didn't know. Buried underneath the depressive thoughts, the anxiety, the voices of society, the voices of my friends and family, the things I heard on social media, buried deep down in there was my own inner voice. And because I was so disconnected from it, I would face these moments where I'm like, is this intuition or is this anxiety? Is it okay that I want this? Is it okay that I feel this way? Is it okay that I don't like what that person did? Is it okay? And this was all coming from a disconnect with my own inner voice, which is why next week, the whole episode is about reconnecting to your inner voice and those pesky questions like, is this anxiety or is this intuition? Because the reality is our emotions will tell us so much about ourselves, and our inner voice will say so much about ourselves, but sometimes we're so disconnected from it. So that is what we will be talking about all next week. But for now, I want to encourage you to start spending some time in reflection. This could just be 5 to 10 minutes at night where you just run over the day and just think about like how things made you feel. And most importantly, what that reveals about what you want, need, and value. This could look like journaling. This could look like sitting, just reflecting in your mind. This could look like doing audio notes to yourself, or this could look like having a car conversation by yourself. I love me a good solo car conversation. So any one of those works. The important thing is that you just get into the habit of tapping into your voice, because this is the foundation, right? Remember that one of the skill sets of being a resilient person is a strong sense of self. So one of the ways we can cultivate that is by spending more time with our authentic inner voice. So to help you with all of that, I've developed a worksheet that will go through everything that we've talked about here today and will also serve as a tool that will help start your journey. If you're interested in getting worksheets, empowering messages, reflections, and of course, notifications about this podcast and new episodes, please go ahead and sign up for my newsletter, A Message in a Bottle. It will be all about those things. And of course, please subscribe so that you know when new episodes are coming out. All right. Thank you so much for joining me for this first episode of the Lighthouse Within. Definitely tune back in next week for that episode on intuition, your inner voice, and using your emotions as a compass back home to yourself. Now, before we end today's episode, I would really like to invite you, if you are not driving a car, I would really like to invite you to close your eyes and put your hand over your heart and take a deep breath with me. Inhale and exhale. Now, with your eyes still closed and your hand still over your heart, I would like to invite you to receive this message that I wrote for you. I am learning. I am growing. I am honoring myself. In the midst of the storm, I am seeking the rays of sunshine that fight to peek through the clouds. I am searching for the revolving light at the top of the lighthouse within me that fills me with courage, with peace, and with strength to navigate the tumultuous waves of life. Hard as they try to topple over my boat, I row with persistence, knowing safety is within sight. As the waves grow taller, rockier, angrier, I hold steadfast, balancing against the raging waters. I am filled with an incomprehensible knowing that I will make it to the shore. Okay, my loves, thank you so much for joining me again. Please tune back in next week, and don't forget to subscribe either to my newsletter or directly to this podcast so that you know when new episodes drop. I hope you have an amazing day.